everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and I'm here with my fabulous co-hosts, as always.
Wow.
Over and over.
I'm doing it always. And then I'm feeling depersonalized. And then I'm also
You didn't say your name.
Exhausted.
You just don't care enough?
I just don't care enough
to say your name?
My name. That's right. My name is inconsequent. It's Jackie.
And it's me, Diana.
Ugh.
I feel the same as you guys, but I'm just great at faking it.
You know what? I just can't get out of bed to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I just feel like looking at articles to talk about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research every week. It's like I'm looking at these objects. Like I don't even care about them anymore. It's just like I'm going through the motions simply because I have to. It's just I just can't anymore. Just can't. I don't know what it is. I wish there were a term to describe my feeling. And I only wish someone had done something in our organization, which I guess I'm a huge responsible party of, to create systems that could somehow have avoided this nameless malaise I am feeling. I'm tired.
That's a good band name.
Just like, I just don't even care anymore. Like, what's the point anymore, y'all? Why talk about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research? Why do it every week on a specific topic? What's the point? Help me. Help you.
Wow. You went down a hole right there. You've been feeling it.
Well, it was originally a bit, and now I actually think I'm believing my own bit. No, it's fine, everybody. It's going to be okay.
It sounds like you're suffering from burnout.
I know. Now I feel like I'm in that Seinfeld episode where Kramer had to describe his maladies to medical students so they could diagnose him, and he had this whole story. It's like, you have like cholera or something, and he has to describe it, and he does it this very like elaborate way. His backstory, and everyone's like applauding his.
I just remember the one where they went to the surgery and they were up on like this balcony thing, and then they dropped a Mike and Ike into the person having surgery.
Oh, I think that was a different episode.
That was Seinfeld. Is that why it's called an operating theater?
Yes, they don't. I don't think they do the big theaters anymore unless you're in med school. Anyway, we're going off track.
Sorry.
This is our episode all about preventing burnout.
You're gonna stay inside the track.
I was playing the part of someone experiencing burnout. Oh yeah, in case you could not tell.
Playing the part was in quotation marks.
Playing the part. It's not a real feeling at all. That is 100%. No, I'm happy to be here. I'm more sad because we were all expecting snow days, and now it seems like it's possible we will not get one. So we're a little down about that. Everyone loves a good snow day.
I love a good snow day. Ugh.
But it won't keep us down for long. We'll get going. So this is ABA Inside Track, like we said. This is our episode on preventing burnout, and this is a listener choice episode. This episode topic was voted on by our patrons at patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, and they all have access, and you could have access too if you want to subscribe, but they all have access to the video version. And on that video, we actually post a separate super secret code where you can get one free CE just for listening. You can listen to the podcast and then go to the post. You don't actually have to watch us record this, but this is kind of our winter listener choice. So it's a chance to go behind the scenes. You might get to see some things that end up getting edited out of the final version. Like my whole beginning bit might not make it to the final cut. Who knows? You might just cut in right here and say, hey, it's ABA Inside Track. We're talking about burnout today. Like that might be the opening that you get on the free feed. We're not sure. You wouldn't even know you missed the bit because it wouldn't exist except for patrons. Anyway, they want to talk about burnout. So that's what we're doing. We talked about burnout a few times before. We're titling this episode Preventing Burnout because in looking at some of the more recent burnout articles, it did seem like, the goal was continually sort of what are some of the factors? And if we know some of the factors that go with burnout, perhaps we can avoid setting up environmental arrangements that lead to quite so much burnout.
Yeah. So if you listen to the preview episode, I am the one that announces the upcoming episodes. And at the time we had it titled Recovering from Burnout. And I was like, that that may be overly optimistic in terms of what we're able to deliver to you.
We got burnout in our naming process, and we had to come up with a new name.
It's, like once you kind of get into the literature, you're like, I don't know that we know that much about the process of recovering from burnout, and I didn't want to oversell it to folks. So I think we have a little more to go on in terms of how one might prevent burnout from happening. So hopefully that's not too much of a disappointment.
And then I was like, you can never recover from burnout. And everyone got real quiet. And I was like, I'm just kidding.
No, I think you can.
You can. You absolutely can.
But I don't think we can. Yeah, I don't think we can speak to it with respect to like the research in our field because no one's talked about it in that terms. That would be a great paper.
That would be great.
To get some info on. So maybe someday in the future.
I did see, I should have grabbed I can't remember the speaker, but I did see there was a talk on, I have to try to find it. I'll look for it once we get the episode going, but a talk on some of the strategies you could use to do a little recovery from burnout. It was a very nice talk. I don't think it gave me the sort of aha moment that I was hoping for when I watched it, but I really enjoyed it. It did have a lot of good information and citations, some of which we talked about on previous episodes. Some of which we might talk about today. I don't believe.
Why don't we make our dissemination station a little bit about where we think what is involved.
That sounds
right.
Great.
Given
Let's
that it's a little less like scientifically based, but we can give our own thoughts.
Great.
So it's time to pull into dissemination.
No, we got to do the episode.
Wait, what?
God, we haven't actually done an episode. We've just talked for a while. So,
oh man, I'm in like a time warp or something.
No. What is this?
Okay,
burnout?
I'm going to tell you. You keep skipping my job, which is to tell you the articles.
Well, I don't want to do your job yet. I want to do the job where we talk about burnout a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the articles. That's what I want to do.
Right.
Again, if you're watching the video, you might see this disagreement. If you get the final cut, I don't know if it'll be in there or not. It's really up to our editor, Dan.
I think he probably leaves all this stuff in.
He might leave this in. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Dan, we're at your mercy. Whatever you want to cut out, feel free. You want to keep this in?
Proceed, Rob.
Special? Okay. So when we talk about burnout, what we're talking about, this is a definition from a previous episode we did on the subject of modern day burnout with Dr. Julie Sloviak. So this is from a paper that she and DeLongchamp did in about 2021 in BAP. And it was a psychological syndrome kind of paired with disengagement and exhaustion.
We love psychological syndrome.
Sort of the sense of fatigue, lack of energy, detachment from work that occurs within an organization. It's also often paired with an intent to quit. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to turn over is the technical term. And again, there's lots of research from other fields. It's only in the past couple of years that there's really been a behavior analysis and burnout sort of tinge to these articles, to the articles that are out there, or the research that's out there. So a lot of the sort of, overarching hypotheses as to where burnout comes from, a lot of it comes from the idea of, well, it could be, physical and mental stress of the job. It could be an imbalance between what you're asked to do at the job and how you're able to do that. It could come from conflicts that occur at the job, which we're going to talk about today. It could come between sort of like what you want to do or what you want to professionally get out of the job and what the job wants to get out of you.
That's a good way to put it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Soviet Russia, job does you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who remembers that? Anyone? No?
I know.
You know that.
I live with you.
Okay.
I don't, but I would never know.
It's a Simpsons reference.
No, it's a Yakov Smirnoff 80s comedian reference.
No, is that a Simpsons reference?
I mean, I don't know if you ever made that joke. It then was a joke in other things making fun of his
I only knew it from the
comedy.
Simpsons.
So when we talk about burnout, what we're really talking about is just pretty much a sense of, I don't want to do this. I don't care about this job anymore. It's often seen by a sense of sort of this depersonalization. So the sense of I'm working, especially in human services, like I'm working with people and they are objects. I'm just doing the things at them. I'm doing behavior analysis at them. I guess it would be really that sense of just not being able to continue. And it can potentially lead to people leaving the field completely because, man, who wants to feel that way? It's not fun. No one wants to go to work and feel sad and tired and like they make no difference. And like everyone around them is just something that they are responding to. It's
yeah, it's unpleasant. It's like all the spark is gone from the thing that you have to engage in. Mm-hmm. That's the behavior analytic term.
The spark,
you see, yeah. Yes.
So, Jackie, you mentioned that you have suffered from burnout in the past.
Oh,
do you want to talk about it? You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I was working in a very high stressed environment. as we all do sometimes. And every time I thought about going to work, I would cry. And when I was at work, I wanted to care so badly, but I didn't. And I would call out sick a ton. And I would avoid my supervisor because I just wasn't doing my actual job, because I just couldn't muster it to do it. And so, yeah, I was feeling really horrible. And I had a lot of responsibility. And I didn't want to do any of it. So that was my burnout experience.
That doesn't sound good at all.
Yeah. And that's not good for you. And it's also not good for your employer either, because they need you there to not just like be a body, but to do a good job and an inspired job. And it's important in our field because our job is working with people. So how the energy that we bring to the table has an impact on someone else as well. And you want to do a good job because you value your contributions, but sometimes you can end up in those positions from being too stressed out and overworked and underappreciated is usually kind of what it boils down to. And then this is a conversation that gets brought up a lot too. And my article will talk about turnover, but unfortunately not cherry or apple turnovers like you used to be able to buy at Arby's, but instead staff turnover.
Slow clap. I'm going to slow clap that.
Those things were so good. I have really, really fond memories of them. I may have to change the pairings actually now that I'm like really getting into it here.
Spoiler alert, you just ruined pairings.
But it is costly to have staff turnover. It's bad for morale, right? And it makes everyone feel worse about their experience, including the clients that we serve if they keep seeing new faces with them. So it's not good on any level, which is why if you're listening to this as a BT or as a BCBA or as someone who is an administrator or attempting to supervise a team or responsible for hiring, all of those people are going to be touched by the effects of burnout and turnover. And they probably are listening to this show to find out what articles we're going to discuss.
We can do that. I was going to talk about my own experience with burnout too.
I was just trying to say.
Why don't we talk about articles instead?
No. You go ahead.
Are you feeling burnout? You're just depersonalized about my feelings? You just want to get to article names?
No, I was just trying to do something different where I talked. But you should keep talking.
Ouch. There's a lot of workplace conflict here. No wonder I'm so burnt out. What articles are we going to be discussing today, Diana?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We have 3 articles to discuss today. They include...
Did you get to the article about conflict and it was like be really passive aggressive? Was that... I don't think that was in my notes. I don't know if we had a different read on that one.
I thought I was doing a good job. Okay. That's fine. Predictors of burnout, job satisfaction, and turnover in behavior technicians working with individuals with autism spectrum disorder by Novak and Dixon, published in Review Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders 2019. We will also talk about Workplace Conflict and Applied Behavior Analysis, Prevalence, Impact, and Training by Kazemi, Carter, and Davies, and that was published in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2022. And Evaluating the Relationship Between Compassion, Perceived Supervisor Support, and Burnout Among ABA Staff by Austin and Fisk, published in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2023.
All right, so we got some of the more recent articles on burnout. And again, at Pairings, we'll talk about some of the other episodes we've done and some of the other resources that we have seen in the past that you might want to check out as well. So now that we learned a little bit about what burnout is, let's learn a little bit more about how it can affect those of us in the human service field. Let's start, Diana, why don't you start us off with Novak and Dixon's article looking at predictors of burnout, job satisfaction, and turnover in BTs.
Okay, so my article is a Just the Facts Ma'am article. So I'm going to give it to us quick. These authors did an awesome job of summarizing the existing literature out there related to burnout and turnover. I almost said that backwards. Turnout and burnover to tell us what correlational variables appear to be in existence across the articles that we have available to us. So I'm just going to review those for us. Like I said, they didn't just look at burnout here because spoiler alert, there were only 5 articles that were focused specifically on these topics as related to individuals who work with autistic clients. So that was a pretty tight focus there as far as the population that they were interested in. But in drawing so tightly into that particular group, they only had 5 articles to work from. So they looked at articles that included predictors related to burnout, job satisfaction and turnover, or intent to turnover. There was one specific CASME article that had that as their DV. So they are giving us a summary across those.
Intent to turnover, I think in a lot of research, in other fields at least, intent to turnover tends to be pretty highly correlated with the eventual turnover.
Yes. And then actually there's a more recent CASME article as well on intent to turnover too, because the one I'm reviewing was published before that most recent one came out as well.
That's going to be the name of my novel, Intent to Turnover.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's about a family that moves to a new town and, they have some hardships and there's a dark secret, but they meet a neighbor that changes their lives.
Oh.
Publishers,
Yeah.
I need to avoid burnout by joining a new field completely.
That was pretty good.
I thought it was going to be a romance novel.
Well, do you know what, Jackie? It's not billed as a romance novel, but most readers of the thing I just made up say that it does have a lot of components of a romance novel in it. So,
it's pretty steamy.
The movie version that I've optioned, it's going to be more romance oriented.
Okay, let's get to it.
Will Ryan Reynolds be in it?
Yes.
No, he's producing.
That's a
he's
selling
producing.
point.
He doesn't want to be in it. He's just producing.
For me. Oh, okay. I'm going to be in a band named Nameless Malaise. So
that's good.
As I've already mentioned to everyone, high turnover is bad. It costs agencies money and it affects morale across the board. These are things that we would like to avoid. There's some existing literature looking at these topics, but it was related to special education services or intellectual disabilities as a whole, nothing specific to autism. So that is how we ended up with the current study that we have here today. As I said, they looked around on the internet to find out what articles were in existence. I loved this part. They took IOA on what should be included, and they were in agreement for all except one article. And then it said, any disagreements between the authors was resolved via discussion.
Mm.
I love that.
What did it really look like?
It's the name of the stick the primary author used.
The discussion stick.
The discussion stick.
Okay. And since there's only 5 articles, I'm going to tell you what they are in case you want to go find them yourself. They were CASME et al. 2015, Gibson et al. 2009, Griffith et al. 2014, Hurt et al. 2013, and Kelly and Barnes-Holmes 2013. So across these 5 studies, they got information from 351 behavior technicians. That was their specific population here. It wasn't solely ABA services they provided. There was some variance there. And most of the studies use the Maslow burnout inventory to measure burnout or some variation therein. So we've probably talked about the Maslow burnout inventory before. Mm-hmm. And then the definition that Rob just provided maps on pretty closely to what they're looking at in the MBI. But it's kind of like a 3-pronged approach. There's emotional exhaustion is one piece of this burnout. Depersonalization, as you said, is another piece. And then your sense of personal accomplishment, which would be sort of like a negatively correlated one to how burned out you feel. So again, of course, it's self-report measure. So it's a subjective measure. We kind of have to take that part and parcel with these types of discussions related to burnout. However, there are other clearly observable components to burnout that one can measure via observation, and leaving one's job would be one of those things, right? So while intent to turnover, which was the CASME one, is something that you're asking folks, as Rob stated, that has been shown to be tied pretty closely to actually leaving one's job within the year. So that's how they were measuring that particular thing for that study.
Wouldn't it be funny if they measured the amount of burnover by how spectacularly people quit their jobs? Did they just say, bye, I'm leaving? Or if they were throwing things and putting things over? That would be a funny.
Oh, do you remember the story? I remember there's one about a flight attendant that quit. They grabbed some champagne and they hit the emergency door and slid down the slide and were like, bye. And then they went out that way.
I think I do.
That was a big problem though, because those things aren't easy to sort of re-deflate or something. So
right. Costing the agency money.
A lot of money. So I think while everyone heard that and was like, that's hilarious, what a funny way to quit, I think it actually was like a huge deal. Like a safety problem. So that would be a 10.
I thought Jackie was frozen.
That'd be a 10 on the Jackie scale of turnover burnout.
That would be amazing. So, yes. Props.
Okay. So after they looked at all these studies, they looked to see like what are all the dependent variables here and what is correlated with either turnover, burnout, or job satisfaction. And then they broke it down into these extremely helpful and clear tables. They had one table that looked at employee variables, one table that looked at organizational variables, and one table that looked at client variables. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of this, and then I'm going to stop talking. So the employee variables, which are in table 2, and I'm basically just giving you a summary of what they were. I'm going to tell you if the things were positively or negatively correlated and with what. So attitude toward autism. If folks had a negative attitude, then that was correlated with greater levels of burnout. Attitude toward typically developing children. If there was a positive attitude there, that was correlated with lower levels of emotional exhaustion. A commitment to the philosophy. So like, do you believe in what you're doing? And is this like your life's work? If they had a greater commitment, then they showed a greater sense of personal accomplishment. Those were correlated. In the coping category, something called quote unquote wishful thinking coping was actually associated with higher levels of burnout.
So when I read that, I don't know about all of you. Did you all sort of picture someone you've worked with in the past who probably did wishful thinking, coping?
100%.
And they were the people that are like, I hate this like this. They come to, and they're just so disingenuous. And you just sort of see them like talking about like, well, here's a bunch of great ideas. And it's like, you're never going to do any of these ideas. You don't even do the basics of the job. I pictured the person it was, because that was typically the person that I was like, this person's not going to be here in a month. And they weren't. They always quit. So I guess we know what that's why. They're wishful thinking coping.
All right.
So
I
it's
wish
like
we had, or the people that were like, I wish we had more support in this area.
Mm.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. But not in a,
maybe I do this. I don't know, because I'm like, this isn't ringing any bells for me. So maybe I am this person. Are you guys both talking about me right now?
No. We've never. We haven't really well, you and Jackie worked together for a lot longer. You and I have barely like worked together in our careers. Well, I guess we do the podcast.
I mean, we're doing this right now.
But like in terms of like our non-podcast jobs we've had.
Okay.
Dinah, it was you. I'm sorry. You're right. You're the wishful thinking cope. No.
I do a lot of wishful thinking, but I try to back it up with like actual practical ideas.
So I think wishful thinking.
Jackie's not responding, so that seems bad.
It's different than what I do, which is like, it should be like this. Is that wishful thinking? If I'm like, here are some of the problems and here are some of the solutions based on research. I feel like that's factual thinking coping, which probably isn't that much better than wishful thinking.
No, it was
coping.
good. That one was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Personality traits. A whole bunch of them. If the person was extroverted, agreeable, and conscientious, then that was associated with lower levels of burnout. If they exhibited extroversion, that was associated with greater job satisfaction. Sorry, introverts. And if they demonstrated neuroticism, that was associated with lower job satisfaction.
How do they define neuroticism?
People are self-reporting all of these things.
Okay.
Self-efficacy. If one said they had a greater sense of self-efficacy, which means you think you can do the thing, whether you can do the thing or not, then that was correlated with higher levels of personal accomplishment. That makes sense. And then not significant included employee demographics, such as age, education, and experience. So there was no correlation up or down for any of those components. Next up, organizational variables. This was another table. Number 1, they wanted to know about the hours that the people were being asked to work. The correlation here was that if the person was being underscheduled, there was a greater intention to turn over. Number 2, job satisfaction. If they had a greater job satisfaction, then there was less intent to turn over and lower levels of burnout. Pay. This is not how much money you made, but rather it is how satisfied you were with your pay. So if a person had a high satisfaction with their pay, there was less intent to turn over. Supervisor support. We'll talk about this one some more. in the future. If they had greater satisfaction with the level of supervisor support they were receiving, then they had lower intention to turnover and lower levels of burnout. Training. If they had high satisfaction levels with the amount of training they'd received, there was lower intent to turnover. Work demands. If they perceived excessive work demands, there was higher levels of emotional exhaustion. And then not correlated at all were the benefits that people received, the setting for the services like home versus school, and the travel time required to get to work. And
That's
finally,
surprising.
I know. And finally, client variables. Guess what? Nothing related to clients was predictive of burnout. Okay? So not how old the clients were, not the quote unquote severity of their disability, not the time spent working with clients. None of those things were predictive of burnout, low job satisfaction, turnover, etc. Okay? So that means it's all in the culture. And I leave it there because now it's somebody else's turn to talk.
All right. So we have this data. We have a lot of things that seem to correlate with burnout. But like you said, Diana, it does appear that the key components are going to have to do with the organization in which you work. And to some extent, sort of how you as a person tend to respond to some of those pieces. But, as we see in other literature, some of which we'll talk about tonight, there are often a lot of mitigating factors that, there's still research to be done as to how much do those mitigating factors sort of combat some of those, personality traits that were correlated. Like if you have a high score of neuroticism, but you also have a high job satisfaction and high pay satisfaction and great supervision, does it all come out in the wash as you're not going to ever burn out? You're doing great. You're going to have a great time here at this company, right? Versus something like you have a great supervisor, but you think ABA is dumb. Doesn't matter. You don't agree with the philosophy. You're going to burn out really fast. You're a wishful thinker, but with great supervision, are you going to burn out or not? Right. And a lot of that we don't have information. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about with the rest of the episode will be, based on the fact that we know these things matter. We don't quite know how much they matter. What steps can be taken to beef up those areas that seem to have correlation with lower rates of burnout. And if you do these things, hopefully you won't see your employees all burn out, but we don't quite know for sure. But hey, it's not going to hurt, right? It's not like...
Hopefully it's not going to hurt.
I don't think it's going to hurt some of the strategies that research says can be effective or can be helpful, but we do not have all the answers. But anyway, we'll see if we get all the answers right after we get back from a little break. We'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
And we are back talking about prevention of burnout. But before we get into our last two articles, I want to remind our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. All you need to do is finish listening to the episode, then go to the website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your podcast notes section to go right to the page. And you'll need to enter in some key information, including 2 secret code words. I'm going to give you the first one now. It's SHOVE, SHOVE, SHOVE. After listening to Rob's attempt to do a comedy bit, Diana wanted to shove him out of frame or on the floor.
But I wouldn't do that.
No, you wanted to.
Violence to men and women is not okay.
But
True.
Diana, I think research shows that your intent to shove is not correlated with your action of shoving, unlike turnover, which we know is correlated.
Originally, the code word it just said take this job and shove it, and so I shortened it down to shove.
Okay.
So.
And then the other code word, which we won't say now, is not related to.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to tell us that at the end. And remember, if you are listening to this either on the Patreon feed or if you're watching the video, you also will have access to a special link where you can go to get a third bonus discount code, which you can enter in and check out, and you will get a free CE as our thanks for supporting us on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track and for voting for this episode, even though it is causing a lot of stress and conflict, apparently. Pretending to be burnout and being slightly burnout in various aspects of our lives, I think is really coming together. I think this is a good bottle episode. This is one you got to listen to, folks. All right, shove. So we talked about some of the sort of correlative factors, correlative behaviors, personality traits that go into the progression of burnout, intent to turnover, actual turnover. So let's talk a little bit about some of those pieces in a little more depth. So we're going to start by talking about Kazemi et al.'s 2022 article on workplace conflict. So the definition of conflict from the article is an antagonistic state or action. Everyone in life will go into some amount of conflict. Certainly, if you're working in human services, you will eventually come into conflict with other individuals. There's a paper by Studdard et al. That they're citing in the Kazemi et al. Paper, where conflict is a dispute, disagreement, or difference of opinion related to the management of a patient. This is from health services, medical services, which involves more than one individual and requires some decision or action. So again, the idea that two people related to some sort of service delivery do not agree as to what some action must be or what decision must be made, and the two are at odds. And it's reported in medical services, so doctors and nurses or physicians and nurses, 78% of them report that they have conflict at work with each other. They also have conflict at work with patients themselves and with just other staff. And this 78% was saying this happens weekly. In educational settings, there's kind of a similar metric. They don't go into exactly whether it's like weekly and exactly who's in conflict, but about 83% of respondents in educational settings say that they come into some sort of regular conflict with other people in the field. A lot of times you will see conflict related with measures on job stress, certainly on turnover, and most importantly for us, burnout and lower job satisfaction. So since we know that conflict is related to burnout, it doesn't necessarily cause burnout, but it's one of those factors that is correlated with a higher degree or higher chance of burnout. Could there be some mitigation of that impact of a conflict by teaching conflict relationships and conflict resolution skills? Because guess what? You're going to be in a conflict. You might as well know how to meaningfully resolve said conflict. So in terms of looking at BCBAs, this is kind of the first study looking at actual conflict statistics in our field specifically as BCBAs. However, if you look at, well, do we as BCBAs learn about conflict resolution? Probably not. I mean, some of us may have learned it. Like I know we did the book club on the Crucial Conversations. We did that where we talked all about conflict resolution. We thought that was pretty direct book. But, certainly we hadn't really done a lot before then, some of us at different times. But if you look at kind of BCBA coursework on a whole, Kazemi and team looked at 4 programs that had the highest number of BACB exam candidates in the years 2015 to 2019. And they looked at their coursework. There was nothing related to conflict resolution in that coursework. And then looking at the readings that are often assigned in any behavior analytic program with 80% or higher pass rate on the certification exam, at least the 2014 certification exam, they were looking at that data, saw no conflict resolution literature assigned. So while bits and pieces of our field may get that as they're becoming BCBAs, that training, it is likely that the vast majority of us have never been taught, what do you do in a conflict? And anyone out there saying, well, of course you show them the data, you clearly have not actually worked with anybody in yet. So don't worry, you'll get there. You'll also get to see how little that changes anyone's mind in a conflict someday. Don't worry, it's coming. So we can also see, again, this is sort of I don't want to say it's a stretch from Taylor et al.'s 2018 survey study, which we love. We have cited that and talked about that study a lot. I do feel like it has become like the Rosetta Stone of, are you writing a paper or discussing a paper related to kind of the more touchy-feely parts of having a job? Well, we're going to cite Taylor et al. Survey, even if it's like not 100% in relation to the topic, but it's close enough, right? Like that's our touch point we have now as our field, which, good for Taylor and colleagues. It's a great study that so many people can get so much out of it. But in that survey, they surveyed parents in terms of sort of skills, like what is the BCBA you work with? What are they doing well? What aren't they doing well? And certainly some of the areas where questions pointed to, hey, they need to get better. We need to get better at this as a field, were things related to our empathy and our compassionate action areas, which again, it's not 100% related to conflicts. But when you look at what meaningful research on conflict resolution is out there, typically you are seeing some amount of empathic listening as a component of the conflict resolution. So it tracks enough there. So when it comes to how do you resolve a conflict, what are some things you should be able to do? They set out some.
I'm just kidding.
Whoever's got the discussion stick wins the conflict. I think we've already discussed. So in terms of resolving a conflict, you have some kind of antecedent strategies. You could actively listen, and we'll talk a little bit more about Kazemi and colleagues' this kind of flowchart plan that they're proposing at the end, which I think goes along with what we know about conflict. We, as in us three, know about conflict resolution, in which you're sort of setting an occasion for the individual to share and for you to therefore be able to respond meaningfully to come up with a solution to a conflict. You also have some consequence strategies in which it would be, do you know how to explain your point of view in a way that allows others to be able to actively listen, or make it easier for them to actively listen, and then provide suggestions such that they feel you will be listening to suggestions and adding to your thoughts, rather than, I'm telling you my idea only because it is the best idea and because you are going to be so wowed by its awesomeness that you do what I say. Which, again, anyone who thinks you're going to have that great, Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams moment where you inspire everyone to jump on their desks and totally agree with you because of your amazing rhetoric, yeah, it's not going to ever happen. I mean, maybe, but we talk a lot on this show, me especially, and I don't know if I've ever had that moment where it's just been like, everyone suddenly agrees. It's not 12 Angry Men, where Peter Fonda gets everyone convinced to agree.
I don't know. You already slow clapped once for me today. So.
I did slow clap for you. Oh. Yes, I did. But again, if you can do...
You were here. It just happened.
Yeah, it was in the recording of this episode.
I know.
But if you can explain yourself and explain your rationale in a way that allows for individuals to feel part of the conversation, you can reinforce the advocacy of your partner potentially. You can promote engagement of your partner in coming up with a compromise plan or a plan. And as we talk about in Crucial Conversations, hopefully it's not a compromise where everyone just gets a little bit of what they want and nobody is happy. It's actually meaningfully coming up with a new solution that everybody likes. And I think that's a key part of conflict resolution that Kazemi and colleagues get into a little bit. But that idea of we're not just trying to, fine, you can have this part of the treatment plan and I'll have this part of the treatment plan, and it won't be that effective and we'll be mad at each other still. Like, that's not good conflict resolution. That's just begrudging acceptance, which is not the same thing. So the study is, again, like many of the studies in area of burnout, a survey of BCBAs looking at how frequently are you involved in a conflict. They explain their process of developing the survey, doing the pilot, and then sending it out through the BACB email system so they could get 494 complete responses. And their questions were things like, how often do you have conflict in the workplace? How often are your conflicts in the workplace unresolved? How often are those conflicts going to lead to turnover? How many times have you lost a case because of a conflict in the workplace? How satisfied are you with your job? How much training have you had in the resolution of conflicts? And then, some demographic questions to see if there's any correlation there.
How often do you cry in the bathroom at your workplace?
I feel like they probably took that one out in the pilot when it was a little too specific. A lot of reasons you could be crying in the bathroom, and it might not be related to your work.
There was a ton of tears on the sheet, so those ones got excluded.
So the majority of respondents were women between the ages of 34 to 48 with a master's degree. Again, we're talking about BCBAs. Mm-hmm. And 58% reported they'd been BCBAs for 3 or more years. And 52% of them reported that they had been a supervisor in applied behavior analysis programs or clinics for 3 or more years. And then 61% reported that they do some amount of supervision of a clinical team, a lot in schools, some in homes, and some in both settings, which is pretty... a pretty representative sample. It was pretty similar, they said, to an APBA similar survey of, who's a practicing behavior analyst at least in the United States.
I was actually surprised about this. I know that they said it was similar, but I was surprised that, only 85% were 34 to 48. That seems old. I know I am in that range, right? But given the data that
46% were 34 to 48.
What? Yeah, I know. But I see. I know that. I'm just surprised because the majority of our field is much, much younger than that. And so that's what I was surprised about, right? Mm. That it wasn't, that number wasn't less. Like, this seems like...
I was too.
But...
Jackie, young people are too busy to fill out surveys. Like, they got too many cool young parties to go to. Like, old people between the ages of 34 and 48 and older probably are like, I hope someone sends me a survey today.
My life is made. No, but you also have to think about that too, because with my study too, like, who's filling out the survey and who fills out surveys, right? So
old fogies.
Friday night
out surveys.
Survey night.
Survey night. I don't know. That just was when I read this article the first time, and then when I heard her present on this topic, that was like the one thing that I was like, whoa, like that seems weird, but who knows? Mm-hmm. Maybe they're all her friends, right? Because behavior analysts know her, and they're like, "Oh, I want to do your survey," and that was like, who knows? Like,
it's possible. As an older person, getting closer to the end of that age range, there, I certainly, when I read studies that have been published in the past like 10 years, and there was a survey, I always go, "Oh, did I fill out that survey? I wonder if I got that. Did I get that survey? Did I skip? I hope I didn't skip it. I don't usually skip it. Maybe I did this. Yeah,
that's funny.
Am I in there? Am I part of the 15% of men who filled out the survey?" Anyway, the numbers are pretty staggering in terms of workplace conflict. So 30% reported they are in conflict daily, 40% weekly, 25% monthly. So basically about 95% of BCBAs are in a conflict at least once a month, if not more. 5% say only annually, which what charmed life are you leading? And then 1% said never, which I'm guessing the 1% that said never, like, are they just oblivious to the world around them at all times? Do they just show up and they're like, they're the boss and they just tell everyone to do things and they don't realize they're in a conflict with everyone and they just kind of go about their day?
Or they let their supervisor handle their conflicts.
Oh, but then that would imply that they are in a conflict and they just don't want to handle the conflict.
Maybe they don't even know. They're like, I don't do that.
I'm pretty sure if you said I've never been in a conflict in the survey, I am guessing you either are in charge and you don't have to be in a conflict as far as you're concerned, or you need some practice in discriminating conflict, not conflict.
Or your administrator.
They got to be in conflicts all the time.
Not the receptionist. Or
they're not a BCBA.
They could be. You don't know.
I guess that seems like not what you went to school for.
Anyway, not unrestricted time.
No,
just noting that.
Not logging that in your.
Okay.
Of the conflicts, the majority of, at least the most frequent conflict reported was with teachers and caregivers, followed by colleagues and supervisees. Yikes! Which again, we know has been a problem in the past. Hopefully less of a problem now, but we know it was cited as a big ethical concern. 11% of the respondents said that the conflict is always unresolved, meaning nobody ever comes up with a solution and they're mad about it forever.
Wow.
33% it's often unresolved. 30% said sometimes it's unresolved. And 23% said rarely unresolved. So again, and then 2% never unresolved. So 75% of folks are in a conflict that it's like hit or miss whether it actually resolves in a way that is meaningful or helpful to the relationship that is in conflict, which is kind of sad. And again, highest number of unresolved conflicts were with teachers and caregivers. In terms of looking at turnover, 62.4% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that I have left a job or I would leave a job because of workplace conflict. 44.7% reported I have had to terminate or I have lost a case due to a conflict, though it didn't really break down the two as just did one of these happen. And that was 44.7% of respondents. And 60.9% said, I agree or strongly agree that my job satisfaction is related to the amount of conflict I have to deal with every day. That the frequency of conflicts did seem to increase as caseloads increase, which makes sense. If you're working with more people, you have more opportunities for conflicts. But the amount of unresolved conflicts didn't seem to relate to how many cases you had, meaning that whether you had a lot of, you might have more conflicts with more cases, but you either know how to handle conflicts or you don't. And the number of caseloads may or may not matter, either because you get more caseloads because you're better at resolving conflicts, or it's just the two aren't considered related. Whether they are or not, we don't know. But that's the reported feeling from the respondents. And pretty much everyone said, I think it's good to know how to resolve workplace conflict effectively. Only 32% though agreed or strongly agreed that I have received the training to do this, which again, if we look back at some of our surveys on, hey, are you great at culturally competent care? Well, sure, I think I am, is a high number. Does that really correlate to being able to practice it? So even though they said they've received the training, does it mean they're strong at resolving conflicts or working with conflicts? And then 68.9% agreed or strongly agreed, I'd love to get training on how to do this. So basically you either got the training or wanted the training was pretty much the response there. This seems pretty much in line with a lot of other human service employee surveys in the past, but a lot of things are still unclear in terms of, do people with a lot of experience with a supervisor just get the tough cases because they can handle conflicts? Is it that BCBAs with limited training are underreporting how many conflicts they're in because like perhaps that 1% of respondents, they don't even know they're in a conflict as much as they are? But again, there should be some amount of conflict resolution training. Would that actually help? It's reported that people feel it might. We don't know if it actually would. But again, it's not going to hurt to teach people how to effectively resolve conflicts. It might not cut down burnout, but it also won't increase. I don't think it would increase burnout. I'd be very surprised to get that kind of a paradoxical effect. But the problem is if you look into conflict resolution theories, it's a lot on like personality theories. There's not a lot of research-based evidence that any of these do anything to impact how we respond effectively to conflicts. A lot of the literature that's out there focuses on people as the source of the problem rather than what are the environmental variables that lead us to engage in conflicts, engage poorly in our conflict resolutions, what steps might we want to take. And while Kazemi and colleagues don't say that talking about personalities and differences in personalities and how people might respond in certain situations is a bad way to start, it doesn't actually seem to teach anyone then what do you do. You know, if I certainly know that someone with high neuroticism might be in more conflicts and then therefore be more, because they're more burnt out and therefore have a harder time dealing with stressors, that's good to know, but it doesn't actually tell me what I'm supposed to do. Like not talk to those people or just let them have their way because I know it'll upset them if I don't. Like that's not really effective conflict resolution because two people are involved in the conflict. And if you're still upset, even though the other person is not upset, the conflict still exists. It hasn't gone away. So they looked at a lot of the literature that actually did have some action steps, and they came up with 5 that they thought were relevant to BCBAs. They certainly started with sort of a pre-step, which is if you think there's a conflict based on our ethics code, you should talk to the individual first to see if you can come up with a resolution, and then talk to your supervisors if the conflict is still unresolved. But kind of with that as the umbrella step to begin with, you need to do some things in that initial conversation, whether it's with your supervisor or ideally with the person you're having the conflict with. Step 1 is A, do I have a conflict? Am I actually engaged in a conflict right now? And not only is there a conflict, but is it a conflict that is someone's fault? Like somebody did something to cause harm or to offend, in which case it's actually a pretty easy conflict to resolve. You should apologize for what led to it and talk about the steps you're going to take so that it won't happen again. And most people will respond pretty well to apologies like this, and the conflict will hopefully therefore be resolved, especially if you then actually take the steps that you said you would. Regardless of how you do this, though, you want to make sure you find a time and a place to meet with that, they call them the opposing party in your conflict. And the time has to be something that's far enough from when the original conflict occurred so that there's less risk of emotional responding. And you want to make sure that there's enough time scheduled so that there's no rush. You can listen. They can listen to you. You can come up with a solution. But it also can't be so long past the conflict that one party might be like, I don't even care about that anymore. Or I've already done what I said would annoy you and I can't go back on it now. And now there's no way to resolve the conflict meaningfully. When you're in this discussion, you want to be practicing your active listening. You are listening to what the person says to you. Then you repeat back in your own words what it is you heard from that other person, so that you're able to sort of get a better understanding. And you're coming at it from the mindset of, I want to understand. There's a reason for this. That is a reasonable reason. I want to know what it is so that you can therefore find what is similar about the two reasons you are giving so you can develop a meaningful solution. This might also require you to paraphrase what is said, ask open-ended questions to make sure you have all the information you need to get that understanding. And then you're able to find the commonalities to collaborate on, okay, what are some things that we could do now that, again, it's not I'm going to get some of what I want, you're going to get some of what you want. It's we're going to come up with a new solution that will allow us to resolve the common issues that we are trying to work on together. Then you make the plan, right? And follow up. Here's how we'll follow up. Are we still in resolution? Did this work? Are we still happy about the resolution? Do we feel comfortable about this? And all the time you're doing this, try to avoid phrases like but in terms of your explanations. Try not to make your explanations sound like you're trying to lecture the person. They don't put that specifically. But again, I think when people say but, it usually implies, I hear what you're saying, but you might as well have said everything you said is dumb. And what I'm going to say next is what matters, which is not active listening. That's just being a jerk. But again, will this flowchart lead to effective conflict resolution? Will this lead to less burnout or risk of turnover? And Kazemi and team don't know. How would you teach these skills? BST probably, but are there effective ways to teach this using BST? What steps need to be fleshed out within that overall framework? So again, a lot of tests that still need to go on. So folks, if you're interested in burnout and you're interested in BST and conflict resolution, well, you can get a whole bunch of studies out of this, I am sure. And it should be easy because it seems like everyone's in a conflict almost every day. So you'll have plenty of participants and plenty of interested participants at that. So that's conflict. That's one way to prevent burnout potentially, is to teach people how to resolve conflicts. So there's one less stressor at least. What about compassion and supervisor support, Jackie? Let's talk about Austin and Fisk.
Yeah, this study I found very fascinating because they had usually there's not like a very clear, like, I want to check out this one variable. Usually people look at a lot of variables, but for this study, they really wanted to focus on perceived supervisor support and its effect on burnout, right? And we all know that there are other factors as well that contribute to burnout because we've talked about them. But what previous research has suggested is that lower levels of burnout are associated with higher levels of support from supervisors and colleagues. Even if you have high work demands, if you have more support by your supervisor, you'll have less burnout. And it also theoretically could go the other way. If you have poor perceived supervisor support, you could escalate those burnout tendencies or characteristics. And that's important because the number one violation for BCBAs is improper and inadequate supervision for those first-year BCBAs, right? So those BCBAs that have started supervising and they're in their first couple of years could actually be escalating burnout for their supervisees if they aren't properly trained, right, and taking care. And one way that these authors suggested that we might be able to mitigate burnout for the supervisees is by compassion. So not only compassion for yourself, but for compassion for other people's and being treated compassionately together. So they recommended that there are 5 parts of compassion. This came from the American Medical Association. Recognizing suffering, understanding that everyone suffers, feeling moved by others' suffering, and that they term this emotional resonance, and tolerating being uncomfortable with your feelings, right? And then motivating yourself to act or relieve suffering from yourself or other people. Compassion is really hard to measure using behavioral terms, and they really wanted to look at seeing whether BCBAs that were rated as highly compassionate would have staff that have lower burnout levels. Or if the BCBA themselves thought that they were very compassionate, would they have lower burnout levels?
Now, was anyone else, when they at least just read the title, like before you'd read the content of the article, worry that the finding would be like weirdly in reverse of like people with too much compassion actually are engaged in more burnout? Because I feel like all we heard more last year was like 2022 to 2023 was about compassion fatigue. Everyone is tired of caring about everybody else. Like, it's exhausting.
Yeah, my weakness is that I just care too much.
I thought it was your wishful coping.
I'm not sure. I didn't have that feeling. I think I went into this with a curiosity that I wasn't sure what would happen, actually, because I haven't thought about specifically thinking of a boss of mine as being compassionate and that making me want to stay at a job. But we'll see. But that was
I mean, it was like the pop psych kind of term was the compassion fatigue. But again, I think it's different to say the individual engaging in compassion and the supervisor engaging in compassion. Because I know one of the issues I've found with a lot of the burnout literature is how much seems to count for how much your environment set by your bosses needs to be doing some of these things. And I know I've been to a lot of burnout talks where everyone's like, we're going to do some mindful breathing. And all I can think about is, why are you making me responsible for not burning out when no one around me seems like, no one in charge of me seems to care enough to do the steps that research tells them might be helpful. Well, Rob, and it annoys the hell out of me. It makes that burns me out. That burns me up and out.
Well, they actually talk about that a little bit in this article. But they had a whoppingly 1,300 BCBAs, and those that were supervised by BCBAs. That is a lot. They actually had more than 1,300, but some people didn't complete the study, and one person got taken out for various reasons. And so they had, I think this is one of the first studies that looked at a wide variety of jobs. So they had behavior technicians, they had classroom aides, they had administrators, they had BCBAs, they had lead teachers, they had behavior analysts, they had related service providers. So they really ran the gamut of all what people did. And they also had a fairly, it seems like, characteristic demographic for BCBAs is such a large sample. Like, the majority were female, the majority of the participants were white. The age now seemed more additional, like with over 600 of the people being 22 to 29, right? And then the second demographic is that 30 to 39, which made me be like, okay, that seems more representative of what's actually happening in our, life.
But they wanted more supervisees, though, so you'd expect that to be.
They didn't want anyone. They gave it to all BCBAs on all BTs, right? So they didn't.
Okay, I'm just looking at this. They included.
Right,
those that were, and then also
they included a lot of people. So I just thought that they responded, mostly behavior technicians responded, but there was also the second was BCBAs. Right, the length of employment is amazing. Is like 0 days to 34 years, with
quite
less
the range.
than 1 to 5 years as the range. Right, the length in time was 1 day to 42 years in the field. I just love that it was like, look at this one person who's like, I'm just in there, woo, right?
What a great first take. You
They're
fill out a survey.
excited to be here.
They're very excited. So the clients...
I'm not burned out.
I'm not burned out at
skew all our data.
The clients that they serve were mostly elementary with only moderate challenging behavior, but did see all of the gamut of aggression, stereotypy, self-injury, that sort of thing. So the measures included a wide variety of things. They looked at demographic information. They looked at client characteristics. They looked at supervisor support. They looked at compassion. They looked at burnout. And they looked at BCBA practices. So they looked at a lot. And most of the domains that they looked at, they used a scale, but they had modified the scale to make it applicable to a technician or a behavior analyst or a specific individual. So like, for instance, for compassion, they used the relational compassion scale that looked at 4 factors related to compassion on a Likert scale. And they looked at, so in the regular scale, it said organization. And so they took that out and put supervisor. It showed strong consistency, so they kept that scale in. They also looked at burnout. Surprisingly, they used the Bergen burnout inventory that looked at exhaustion, cynicism, and sense of inadequacy. So a higher score here indicated higher burnout. And they didn't specify why they didn't use the other burnout scale that everybody else used, because that was a limitation that they couldn't compare the results of their study to other studies.
Like the Maslach?
Yeah. Well, I was just, that was interesting. And then this is the kicker.
Bergen just makes me think of trolls now.
Same. I'm so happy that you said that, because when I read it, I was like, I thought the same thing.
And those Bergens are burnt out.
They are very burnt
They are
out.
not enjoying life.
Well, they haven't eaten any trolls.
No, and they're burnt out.
Is that the solution? Is that how you prevent burnout?
No one studied it, so I don't know.
Yeah, good. We solved it.
Plenty of research.
This final category gave me pause, because they did an open-ended questionnaire for what BCBAs do in their practice, and the results are not shared in the study, and they don't tell us why.
Ugh.
I wonder if they're saving them for another publication.
Yeah, maybe, but don't include them then. I just was sad. I'm going to email.
Well, they have to be honest that the data were collected at the same time as these other data, and I bet they're going to come out as their own.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Those results must be so exciting.
I know,
my
I was
God,
like-
it needs some publication.
What am I missing here? But I know the second author, so I may.
We're on
email her and
tenterhooks.
ask her.
Why did the editor not put it to be continued ... or the end
They
question
can't
mark?
guarantee that if it's not.
Right?
Oh,
They
Press.
also gave surveys to measure the additional variables related to burnout, such as social support, satisfaction with training, and perceived organizational support, or if you had an intent to turnover, but those are their secondary variables. And if you completed all the survey, it seems like it took a long time, but they didn't say how long it took, but all the things that they asked, it seems like it would be like a kind of hefty survey. You could win one of 10 $25 Amazon gift cards.
$25?
What?
$25?
$25 is big.
I'd do it.
I would
Yeah.
too.
you can buy my new book, Intent to Turn Over, and hardcover.
A romance novel. So because it was a survey, they used a one-way ANOVA to look at the differences between job title and burnout scores. And then this just made me giggle. They used a post-hoc turkey test. I don't remember what that is, but it just made
I'm pretty
me
sure
laugh.
it's Tukey's.
Tukey test.
Yeah.
Oh.
Did Google autocorrect
I think
it for you?
it changed it to
You know what's
turkey
funny?
test.
I read it as turkey.
Oh.
I read it as
So you
turkey
can't blame
test.
Google. That's all you.
I did, and I couldn't find it, and I was like, I don't know what this one is. I remember what the Tukey test is, but I did not remember what the
Oh
turkey
my
test
God.
was.
Oh man,
So that made me
it's invented
giggle.
by the Pilgrims. The old turkey test.
So I'm really glad
That's amazing.
not it. But they were looking to see if there were differences between all of the different service providers that they had looked at, right? And then they finally did the multiple regression and mediation analysis. Again, I read meditation analysis and not mediation. So something's going on right now in my brain. And I was like, wow, I didn't know there was a meditation analysis. And then I looked at it again. But I did not look again at the turkey test. So who knows?
Sorry, it's a lot of statistics out there. It's not, we don't do as much in this field.
They looked at whether compassion was a predictor of burnout. So here, the results here are baffling to me. I was very surprised because they somewhat aligned to previous literature and previous surveys, but some of the things are like very shocking. So this one's not. Lead teachers and program coordinators have the highest level of exhaustion, right, on the predictors of burnout, where administrative staff had the lowest level of everything. They had the lowest level of burnout, cynicism, and feelings of inadequacy. So if you are administrative staff, you're probably doing great in your life, right? Because you don't have any burnout, it appears.
I don't believe in self-efficacy as a rating. It's like, I think I'm amazing. It's like, does anyone else think that about you?
Maybe not. But so here's where I can see it and not see it. Classroom assistants and behavior technicians had the lowest level of exhaustion burnout, which I think is surprising because techs usually on these surveys don't have higher levels of burnout but the higher level of burnout were reported by the behavior analysts. Right? So previous results in the literature about, if there's higher intent to turnover, you saw higher burnout. But it's interesting that the behavior techs had less burnout than the behavior analysts. But
I'm wondering how much that has to do with things like if you're a behavior technician, you probably have a lot of different reasons for intent to turn over. Like if you're an established behavior analyst, you are I would assume, more likely to stay at your job for longer. And if you're going to turn over, it would be for, factors in which you're not well supervised, you're not being well compensated, you are burnt out, and you're just like, I can't do this anymore. Whereas like for behavior technicians, they might be turnover because I'm going back to school for my master's degree, or I just did this job for a year while I was, waiting for a different career path I was going to take. Like there are more reasons, I think, to turn over that aren't burnout related.
Right. And I was just surprised that they didn't and I was also thinking of responsibility, like the BCBAs are responsible for a lot of things. They're responsible for decreasing burnout in their staff, right? And everyone's basically blaming the BCBA when staff turn over for not giving them good support. So I can see it. I can see why BCBAs may feel more or higher levels of burnout than technicians. But spoiler alert. Well, I guess it's not a spoiler because we're going to talk about it right now. But the one reason
It's
why
the time of the show where we talk about the results of this
the
article.
one reason why they did the study was whether a compassionate BCBA would be a predictor of burnout. No. According to their first model, they're like, no, not at all. And so I'm wondering if that's why they did all the secondary variables. So they thought maybe there was a mediating effect and they teased some variables out. And what they found is that ABA providers who rated their BCBA more highly in compassion were also more likely to rate their supervisors highly in the area of perceived supervisor support. Right. So in turn, supervisor support was reported to lower burnout. So maybe there's like some, like you have a better relationship with your BCBA if they're more compassionate, but BCBA compassion alone in the model that they were using was not a predictor of burnout. And, it is also interesting to note that we can't really compare this study against other studies because they use different measures. And the authors say that there was a lot of partial disagrees, which would not be characterized as high burnout. And they were wondering maybe because it was such a larger sample than previous studies that you're seeing what's actually happening, right? And maybe burnout may not be the best measure for the field right now since we have all these new BCBAs coming in. Maybe if you looked at work stress, that would show something different. And I was thinking that maybe we shouldn't be just looking at behavior technicians, right? But this survey is like the behavior analysts themselves cry for help, right? Like, I am burnt out, help me. And what can administrators that may not be behavior analysts, right? Because it's going to be maybe a principal or an administrator or, someone outside of our field. How can we train them to help support the BCBAs to be less burnt out? That's just a me thing. When I'm thinking about who typically supervises BCBAs at that higher level, it's not other BCBAs, right? It's typically not, especially if you're in a school system. And though how can we alleviate this cry for help for our BCBAs that are like, I am emotionally exhausted, I want to quit my job, and what can we do to support them? I don't know. I know, right there, that wasn't part of the study, but that part I found really interesting is that maybe compassion doesn't matter. So sorry.
Well, it might matter for supervision quality.
Right.
Which, again, is not bad to have. But
right. But when you're looking at burnout,
or it may just not be the only factor.
Right. Yeah. But I think the golden nugget here is that, hold up. We've been talking about behavior techs for all this time and all the studies are looking at behavior techs, but maybe we should turn our focus to the behavior analysts, because if they're not doing well, how can then they promote lower levels of burnout for their technicians when they can't even do it to themselves?
Yes.
Yeah.
More research is needed.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Well, let's go into the dissemination station. Whoa, everybody, if you're watching the video, you got to see it in real time.
The train came
It
in.
looked like.
Now we're caught up with myself from the beginning of the episode.
Okay, great. So, Diana, why don't we now that we're here, why don't you start us off with our dissemination station thoughts?
So I had said at the beginning of the show, maybe we, during dissemination station, to think about ways in which one can, if you find yourself in a burnt out place, how one can sort of work to come back from that. But I want to caveat it with saying, I don't know exactly. I'm just here to provide some of my own thoughts. And I think that something has to change. If you are in a burnt out place, something's got to give. And that could look a few different ways. It could be that you need time away from whatever is stressful. And for some people, it's just like, if I could just actually take a vacation and take a good break and unplug from all of this, then that will give me the strength to come back with renewed intensity and carry on. And that's awesome. Sometimes that it will be enough, and sometimes you don't have the opportunity to do that, and sometimes it's not enough. So that's one type of change. Another type of change would be looking at what are those stressors that are really impacting you in your job and in your relationships and potential conflicts at work, and take the onus on yourself to create change where you can. And that could involve having some tough conversations with your supervisors to lay out for them what you are actually experiencing and coming to them with ideas on ways in which you can make that situation better. And it could also be that you need to have a drastic change such that maybe you do need to change positions, careers, or responsibilities. And finally, it may be that you need to give yourself some grace and have an opportunity to say, this is tough right now, but I think about what's important to me, and doing this type of work is important to me. So I'm going to give myself some short-term and long-term goals that I'm going to work toward to ensure that I'm still continuing to be successful in my career. And I personally find that having some exciting change and aspect, even if it's still job related, can like really get me back on track and excited about what I'm doing again. So finding some type of passion project within the context of your job can help you with this turnaround too. So saying to yourself, I need time away, I need to make a change, or let me think about something else that could get me excited again. Any of those may be appropriate paths to help you out of burnout. What do y'all think? Again, that was all speculation.
That all sounds good to me.
Oh,
I think I have things to say.
okay.
I think if you also have to do a lot of work. If you're burnt out at work, you have to also look to see if it is your work, if it's actually your work, or if it's your life, like your personal life, right? Because I know a lot of the times when I'm feeling burnt out, it might not be work related, but it's just seeping into work. And so when I get to work, I'm like dysregulated, right? I'm not like organized, and I'm thinking about other things. And so then that causes me to, care less about my work because I'm caring about something else. So I think you really need to think about where the uncomfortable feelings are coming from, because it might not be your work. You might actually love your job, but you can't really love your job if you're not loving yourself, right? Like if you're not in.
It's true.
It's true, right? Like,
I know, it just sounds so corny.
It is corny, and it's also true though, right? Like if you're unhappy with something in your personal life that you're, trying to overcome, and you try to get to work. So that's just a caveat. I've seen some, I've supervised a lot of people, and I've seen people, they're doing their job, but they're just not loving their job. And it's because they're not happy outside of work. Right. And so how do you then make that balance of, okay, I'm doing okay at work, and then I'm doing okay at home too.
Mm-hmm. Good observation.
Thank you.
Someone should write this up.
We should.
I mean, I think the areas that I'd like to see more research, and hopefully we will continue to see more research, are going to be, let's test some of these out. How much we have a sense of these are important factors. Okay. Is there a way we could measure how important or how not important? Are there some skills, kind of like conflict resolution, that whether or not it is going to result in lower rates or the same rates of burnout, I can't imagine anyone would be like really upset. It's like, well, now I'm really good at resolving conflicts. Ugh, I can't believe it. And our burnout rates haven't changed. Like, I don't think anyone's going to see that as a negative. It just would point to conflicts not really being the contributing factor. Or again, it's doubtful that there's one contributing factor. Like, if only we had blank, no one would have burnout. It is probably one of those highly complex social behaviors that has a lot of factors that play into it. And we're just talking about what decreases the probability that it happens. We're not talking about solving it forever and ever. So certainly supervision. But I think, at least for the articles we talked about today, the idea of the conflict resolution was in there. Compassion doesn't seem to matter. So I guess you could be as big a jerk as you want to. And it doesn't. No, there's no point in being a big jerk about anything.
I don't think that's it.
Being compassionate may not result in any change in burnout rates, but it could result in better supervision, which could result in changes in rates of burnout. And then, like, kind of what everyone is saying. I do want to also shout out, I did find, I mentioned at the top of the show, because I have been feeling some of the pangs of burnout, I think this year more so than in many, many years. And I did find kind of a talk I'd gone to, because I saw it and I was like, man, I got to do something, because I really thought vacation was going to do it for me. And all vacation did was make me think, I never, ever want to stop being on vacation. So it really wasn't enough to sort of jog me out of my burnout. And so I saw a talk. It was by Nikki Dion, who is a BCBA, but also is a social worker. So shout out to Nikki. This was on, I think it was the Master ABA was where I got the email from on managing burnout. And so certainly some of the topics we talked about here, but if anyone's interested in hearing some of Nikki's suggestions, I don't want to blow her spot, just repeating what is in my notes. But the what is it called? Managing Burnout and Compassion Fatigue. I believe it's on Master ABA, Nikki Dion, or by looking up Nikki Dion, the BCBA social worker, and getting, talking to her about that. The topic. She did have some good ideas. I think some good ideas, not exactly in line with, they were in line with the research we talked about today. I don't think they were pulled from some of these. I don't believe some of these references were in the talk, but looking at some factors that you yourself could look at. Some of them having to do, I think, with what you were saying, Jackie, the idea of how are you making sure that you yourself are feeling okay, rather than just assuming you're not feeling okay because of just your job. Like, there are a lot of other factors. So, what can you do for yourself actively? So she had some good ideas there.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Cool. This was fun. Thanks, everyone, for recommending us to talk about this.
Well, they didn't recommend it. They voted it, and therefore we had to do it. They got out the discussion stick, and that was all there was to it. Let's go into pairings.
All right, everybody, it's time for pairings, which means this is the section of the show where I tell you about previous episodes that are part of our back catalog that you might want to check out if you thought that this episode was of interest to you. So,
or even if you didn't, you might want to check them out and wonder if those were better. It's possible. Either way.
Well, a lot of the ones I'm going to recommend had guests, and that's always nice, right? To hear from other experts in the field. So you could go back and listen to episode 199, in which we discuss self-care and modern day burnout with Dr. Julie Sloviak. You could check out episode 145, self-care with Dr. Shane Spiker. You could check out episode 159, Act in the Time of COVID with Dr. Evelyn Gould. Episode 161, Mindfulness Practices with Dr. Joshua Felver. Episode 184, Responding to Feedback with Drs. Tyra Sellers and Seth Walker. Or episode 1007, the 1000s are book club episodes. That was our Crucial Conversations book club. So you might want to go check out any of those. And then I also like to recommend a snack to go with these episodes as well. So I have 2 snacks for you today. I did not end up changing it because these are thematically related to one another. So I'm going to recommend 2 kind of fancy snacks for you to have. One of them is char grilled oysters. Rob says no.
I don't know. I'm trying to pick out the theme.
Okay. And then the other one is bananas Foster. Do you want to try to figure out the theme here?
Is that they have alcohol in them?
No, but you're close. You're right. The bananas Foster is also called bananas flambe sometimes, right? So what happens to it? It gets set on.
Oh, fire.
Fire! That's right. So both of these are foods that have been through the fire, come out the other side, potentially a little bit burnt, but still delicious.
Mm.
Wow, you really thought about this.
Did you ask them? Did you ask them how they feel about this process? They might be like, it's never going to be this. I'm never, you know what? Much like after burnout, I'm never going to be the same.
That's why more research is needed.
I hope someone eats me and puts me out of my misery. Is that?
Please enjoy.
Oh boy. Oh boy. All right. Well, burnout. And sorry, folks, I hope no one, I don't want anyone who is actually experiencing burnout or is concerned about burnout to take it that our light tone and kind of goofery is meant to diminish the importance of burnout. Like Jackie said, she has gone through burnout. I myself have very recently been struggling with burnout. So please take it as the gallows humor that we expect it to be. Part of doing this show is we like to enjoy learning about behavior analysis, and we like to have fun with each other, and then hopefully you get to enjoy listening to that. But that does not diminish how serious burnout can be. And for folks who are wanting to do something to support their own challenges with burnout, we hope that we have some ideas or areas that you could be looking at. Unfortunately, I don't think we talked about too many that the individual can do on this episode. So maybe check out some of those other ones or reach out to some of the guests that we have done previous episodes with for more information as well, because it is a very serious problem. And certainly if you are going through burnout, we are with you in spirit. It is not pleasant to go through. All right. Well, with that, we come to the end of our episode. Thank you all so much for listening. If you are a patron, don't forget to click on the link, or if you're not watching the video, click on the link to go to that page so you can get your discount code. Thank you so much for voting on our topic for our winter listener's choice on burnout. So we were able to continue our discussion in this area. We want to thank everyone, though, for listening. We hope you subscribe to ABA Inside Track, whether on the free feed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or whether on our patron feed at patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. We also hope you check out our website, abainsidetrack.com, as well as send us email sometime, abainsidetrack@gmail.com, or message us on all the socials or directly on the Patreon page. However you'd like to get in touch with us, we definitely appreciate it. And again, as previously said, if you want to get episodes a week ahead of time, if you want to get access to some of our episodes to get free CEs, especially these listener choices and our book club episodes, they do eventually come out on the free feed, but you'll get them like a year later. So probably want to get them earlier, as well as get access to some free CEs for subscribing. Again, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. Also, a couple other big thanks. Certainly, big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro and outro music, Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thawitt of the Podcast Doctors, who has the fun job of editing this episode so that he keeps in the fun video stuff for patrons, which I'm sure was all fun, and then cuts it out for everybody else so it doesn't get too silly, I think, in the main feed. So we thank you very much, Dan, from the Podcast Doctors. Almost forgot your last secret code word, which Diana's going to tell me the meaning of it all without spoiling the first secret code word. It is margarita, which is that how it's really spelled?
Yeah. Well, if it's the drink, not if it's the pizza.
Okay, no, it's the drink, margarita, MARGARITA, margarita. Is the idea that one prevention of burnout is to drink a lot of margaritas and then you don't quite feel so burnt out?
No, it's because everyone says, like, if only I could just be on the beach with a margarita, everything would be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what everybody says?
Everybody says it, Rob.
Oh, geez. That wasn't my idea of fine, but all right. When in Rome.
You can take a trip to Margaritaville.
I'm closer to fine.
Oh, boy. Well,
now we're mixing songs.
All right. Well, margarita. There you go. And with that, let's wrap up the show. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.